One of the most iconic movies to come out while Walt Disney was alive. There's still few stories out there that are as well known as Cinderella. Everything from the glass slipper to the wicked stepmother to the fairy godmother and the pumpkin coach. There's no denying that this is one movie that cemented its place in pop culture. But despite all of that, this movie has still managed to become controversial in some circles, mainly for its depiction of the main character herself, Cinderella, as some believe she's a bad role model, sitting around submissively just taking all the abuse that's thrown at her, waiting for a prince to come and save her. However, that couldn't be further from the truth in all reality. Now, I know that most of the time I try to stay impartial and keep my opinions out of the conversation, or at the very least do try to play devil's advocate, but this is one time where I'm just going to plainly say what I think. Cinderella represents every child that's the victim of parental abuse out there. And to call her weak and a bad role model is nothing but an insult and huge slap in the face to those people. Because I don't claim to have any first-hand experience in that department, but I do know enough to say that if somebody genuinely believes that about Cinderella, then they know nothing of what it's like to be psychologically tortured by the people that are supposed to love them the most. Which is definitely a good thing, don't get me wrong, but it also shows a lack of understanding to the people that have suffered through it. And today, I'd like to try and explain why this thought process of Cinderella is frankly so backwards. Now, obviously, this is going to be one of my more darker, real-world subject type videos, so if that's not your type of thing or a subject you don't want to get into, you are most definitely free to leave. And there will also be spoilers ahead, just in case for some reason you've never seen this movie but plan to. Okay, so to get right into it, as I said before, I don't claim to have any first-hand knowledge about parental and mental abuse. That being said, I have heard plenty of stories from people who most definitely have, as well as have something of a very amateur understanding of psychology. And let me just say, if you believe Cinderella is bad, let me tell you, Walt Disney was sugarcoating it. But he wasn't just doing that for the benefit of the children, but also because that's kind of the whole theme of the movie. The value of compassion and optimism. Because, as most of you undoubtedly already know, a lot of people who are abused as children go on to abuse their own children. And that mainly comes down to either because that's the only form of love they've ever known, or because they were so thoroughly destroyed by their parents that they just don't care anymore. But the point of Cinderella is that people in these situations don't have to become like that. If they just remain positive and compassionate no matter what, someday they will be rewarded for it. And believe it or not, that is a very important message to children who have been abused. To not only hold out hope that someday things will get better, but that it's always important to be kind to others no matter what. Because what a lot of people don't realize here is, it's not Prince Charming or even the fairy godmother who rescues Cinderella. It was her own hope and kindness that did that. Because as the fairy godmother herself states, if you didn't still believe, I couldn't be here right now. In other words, the fairy godmother is a metaphor for Cinderella's own hope coming to her aid when she needs it most. And later on, when she's locked in and her one chance of escaping has seemingly been destroyed, who is it that gets her out? The mice, the birds, and Bruno the dog. And why did they help her? because she had been so nice to them. Basically, if Cinderella had become embittered or just as bad as her stepfamily, she never would have escaped that situation. It was only by maintaining her optimism that the fairy godmother was able to get her to the ball to meet the prince, and her undying compassion that leads her animal friends to come to her aid when she needs it. Because she had spent years being nice and loving and taking care of them and asking for nothing in return. So they don't hesitate to help her in any way they can when she needs it, to the point that they're practically willing to die for her if need be. To put it simply, the fairy godmother and animals are allegories for Cinderella's good qualities, which therefore tells the audience that it's only through kindness and optimism can one truly escape from abuse. Because if they become embittered and do the same thing to others, then they haven't really escaped anything. But at the same time, anybody who suffered from parental abuse will know that it's hard to remain kind, compassionate, and optimistic. Frankly, Cinderella may not beat up anybody or be particularly strong, but her will and determination not to let her stepmother break her makes her as strong as Superman himself in my book. Because what people don't seem to realize is, mental strength is just as important, heck, even more important than physical strength. And Cinderella's got it. Not even at her lowest moment is her stepmother ever able to break her. And she keeps on fighting and staying optimistic until the moment things finally turn around for her. And really, I don't see how any of this is harmful to teach children. Frankly, I've even heard several people who were mentally abused as children say that this movie was one of their chief sources of comfort, because it honestly told them everything they needed to hear. The real problem is that people don't understand what these children go through. And that's what leads to two of the chief arguments against her. Why doesn't she fight back? And why doesn't she just leave? Now, to answer the first question first, what exactly is fighting back going to accomplish? If she were to protest every time somebody did anything against her, it would only mean more work and misery for her. She'd only be bringing even more unnecessary problems onto herself. And I'm sorry to say it, but that's the reality of it for most people in that situation. Fighting back is useless because the abusive parent has all the power and is just one excuse away from making her victim's life even worse than it is. That's why many psychologists have actually argued that it was wise of Cinderella to keep her mouth shut. And even then, she does fight back and protest when she does have a leg to stand on, such as when she argues why she should be allowed to go to the ball with them. The point is, just because she doesn't stand up for herself every time she's slighted doesn't mean she's a pushover. Frankly, her silence is just another show of her infinite willpower. And that second question in particular annoys me. Because where exactly is she going to go? She has no money, no other family, and no person that can help her. But you mean to tell me that in spite of all of that, she's just supposed to up and leave? And I repeat, to where? What is she supposed to do? It can be a dark, cruel world out there all by yourself. Sometimes it's even worse than the evil stepmother. And as the old saying goes, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And people also don't understand that mental abuse is all in the mind. The abuser creates a cage and traps the child inside of it, all the while saying that they can never escape it. And for Cinderella in particular, This is made even worse by the fact that she has no outside resources to help her physically escape the house. And that's where the prince comes in. He is her ticket out of there, because he's a man that genuinely, truly, and completely unabusively loves her, and as the highest authority in the land, he can provide her with everything she'd ever need, and her stepmother is completely powerless against him. To put it simply, in one moment, Cinderella goes from being a slave to an abusive woman to realizing that the wholesome prince, a man more powerful than said woman, wants her as his bride. Now, is it any wonder she reacts the way she does? Now, of course, this is where some people argue that she waited for her prince to come and rescue her. But again, these people are completely missing the point, especially because the truth is a lot darker. Because A, Cinderella just went to the ball to have a good time, and states as much a couple of times. B, she had no idea the man she was dancing, having a great time, and falling in love with was the prince. She's explicitly shown to not realize that until the next morning. C, she had given up on escape. As far as she was concerned, the ball was just a one-night release from her slavery, just so she could enjoy herself for a few hours. And the man she danced with, even if she had the best time of her life with him, as far as she was concerned, she was never going to see him again. Basically, when everything turns back to normal, she's already accepted that she would go back to being a servant girl for possibly the rest of her life. She wasn't waiting for any rescue. She had long given up on that. She was simply going to remain in her abusive life because she had no other option, and if she had to spend the rest of her life that way, then she'd just try and make the best of it. And I don't know about you, but I think that has some very tragic undertones to it. The fact that Cinderella wasn't even looking for an escape when she went to the ball, but just some fun, because that's how scarce it was in her life, and being fully ready to go back to her abuse the next morning. But simply put, that is the life of an abused child. Even the best moments in their life are just fleeting releases from their torture. And unfortunately, if she hadn't left that shoe behind, he may very well have never found her, and she would have been stuck there for who knows how long. And frankly, what's wrong with the fact that she needed help in escaping her stepfamily? As I went over before, she couldn't have left on her own. She just couldn't have. Really, the only way she could escape is the way she did. And once again, that's just the reality of it for many people. Whether it's the abuser's crippling mental torture or them making it physically impossible, most abuse victims cannot escape by themselves, and they shouldn't be shamed for that. Cinderella is absolutely the victim of this story, and people shouldn't be blaming her for not doing more. Because frankly, somebody in her situation, no matter how hard they tried, wouldn't be able to escape on their own without somebody else to help them. And again, there should be no shame in asking for somebody to help. And yet, all too often they are. I even once heard a story of a man with mentally abusive parents who was shamed by people in school for basically doing the same thing that Cinderella did. Just tried to make the best of his situation. And all that did was destroy his self-esteem even more. He even admitted that he felt like a dirty coward for not either leaving or killing himself. Yes, you heard that right. Those people made him feel like a coward because he wouldn't kill himself. And how did he finally escape? With the help of his eventual wife. And he also admitted that it took him years to realize that he wasn't a coward for roughing it and waiting for things to get better. Now, unfortunately, I've got more stories just like that, but I think that'll do it for the moment. My point here is, this man did everything Cinderella did, and they shamed him just like some people do Cinderella. And see what the result was? But you also notice the fact that he not only escaped with the help of a loved one, but that things did get better for him because he stayed a nice person? But I'm not going to spell it out for you. Draw your own conclusions between these parallels. Now listen, if most of what I said here came as a shock to you, then that is a good thing. Obviously, one doesn't want to be able to personally relate to Cinderella, because if they do, their life is pretty messed up. What I'm just saying is that people need to be more understanding of people like Cinderella. Because the thing is, this movie told the truth. Cinderella is a representation of all the abuse victims out there, and the stepmother represents all the abusers. That's why you're supposed to absolutely hate her guts. Because she may not be as realistic as Mother Gothel, but this woman is still the apex of many abuse victims' fears rolled into one person. And as far as Cinderella herself goes, as I touched on before, she's honestly a person who should be loved and admired for her actions and behavior, not judged and ridiculed for it. Because as I also went over before, her situation isn't that unsimilar to a lot of real-life abuse victims out there. And if how some people feel about this movie is any indication, I think we all need to start having a little more sympathy for the victims of abuse and a lot less tolerance for the abusers of those victims. Okay, that's everything I have to say on that. And once again, sorry if this video was a bit of a downer, but I just felt this was something that had to be said. So now I want to hear your opinions. What do you think of all of this? And do you think I have my facts straight or not? However you feel, please let me know in the comments. And thank you all for watching. It is all very greatly appreciated. And I hope to see you all next time.